Hi, John Fisher. It's me again, Friday afternoon. And this time just hoping to finish the bit of the creed that speaks about Jesus' suffering. And it's very providential that we're going to end speaking about Jesus' suffering and his death in Lent. And then after the Easter break, when we think about the resurrection, then the creed starts to talk about the resurrection. So that's worked out quite nicely. So we just focus on the last few phrases of the creed, which say that Jesus died, he was buried, and he descended into hell. And again, the sort of question that's guiding our reflection is, what difference does this make to my life? Yes, Jesus was buried and he descended into hell, but how does that affect me? How is that going to help me? And I'd like to suggest that it might help you by giving you an example, a story in fact. So earlier on today in this church where I am, in fact just in front of the altar there, lay a coffin because we just had a funeral. And this was the funeral of a priest called Father Ollie Kemp. He died, he was 82 years old. And died in hospital in unfortunate circumstances. But the priest who preached today at his funeral, from the ambo, you can see it there, he gave us a sort of potted history of Father Ollie's life. And he had a tough life. This priest, he originally came from Ireland, came over to Birmingham, but at the age of 3, his mother died. So he never really knew his mother. He was the youngest of a large family, and unfortunately his father felt that he just couldn't support young Ollie growing up. Financially it was difficult, he had, didn't have the time, he had to work and so on. So at the age of 3, Ollie went into an orphanage. It was an orphanage run by nuns, who I believe were caring, but unfortunately they believed at that time that it was wrong to show too much affection to the children in the orphanage in case they got too detached to them, I suppose. And so the children there were never cuddled, they were never given affection. And so Ollie grew up in this orphanage, never knowing what it was to be embraced by his mother, his father, or anyone. Then, when he was a bit older, he went to boarding school until eventually he was ordained a priest. And he later said that growing up, he had never heard anyone tell him that they loved him until years later, when I think eventually he did see his father when he was a bit older, who told him that, or perhaps it was another relative. On top of that, in fact, it was only a few days after his ordination, I think 4 days after his ordination, that Father Ollie's dad died. And so one of the first things that Father Ollie did as a priest was to carry out the funeral of his father. So a sad life, a difficult life. Thankfully, things turned out a bit better, but he always was a priest who was very familiar with suffering. However, those who met Father Ollie, when they described him, they said that he was somebody who was always smiling, always joyful. And when you think of somebody who's growing up was never told that he was loved, that he never really knew his mother, hardly knew his father, how could somebody like that, deprived of love, grow up to be smiling and joyful? And the priest who was preaching today at Mass at his funeral explained that it was because he had this great sense that he was part of a family. It was God's family, and that Jesus was his brother, God was his father, and then there were all the brothers and sisters that he came to know through the church, and thankfully Father Ollie developed many friends with those whom he served. And so he came to see himself as very loved and part of this big family. But also he knew from his experience of being alone as a child, not knowing that love of say, physical brothers and sisters of his blood, not knowing his mother and father, he had to discover by force the love and the family love of God that God provided with him. And it was only through that he could discover that he was never really alone and he was never really unloved, that God was with him even in those darkest moments. How does any of this relate to the Creed? Well, we believe that Jesus not only died for us, which was great as it was, and after all that suffering, Jesus could have said, right, I've died for them now, I've died for humanity, that's it, job done, that's it, no more. But instead, Jesus, we learn from the Creed, descended into hell. What's the point there? Jesus wasn't content to just die for us on the cross. He had to go even further than death. He went down into hell. The idea is that he went down into the darkest, most abhorrent place, the place of utter despair, the blackness, so that everyone, no matter what situation they found themselves in, would feel that Jesus was there with them. In other words, when we, and I hope this never happens to you, but the chances are life does have its difficult moments. And sometimes there may be moments when we feel we're completely alone. We feel we're either physically alone or we're alone in the sense that nobody understands us. Even our parents, if we have parents, or our guardians, or our siblings, even our friends, or people who we thought were friends. And there comes a moment in our life when just nobody seems to understand us. We feel abandoned, people have let us down, but perhaps we're in this situation where we just see no way out, and it seems that all hope has extinguished. And in those moments, what can we do? Well, if we don't have faith, if we don't believe in God, then if we're alone, there's nothing much we can do. We can try to turn to people, but if they don't help us, then we can really be in a very difficult place. The wonderful fact about the Creed, where Jesus says that he descended into hell, is the fact that he descends into our darkest moments. It means that there is never a time when Jesus abandons us or leaves us alone. That at any moment we can turn to him and ask for his help, and he will come. There is in Christianity no absolute darkness. There is no place where the light of Christ cannot reach. Christ can always penetrate his light, even if it's a little light, just as a little candle in a dark room can light it up. So the light of Christ can always shine, no matter how bad things get. And that's a great consolation to those of us who believe. Which is why I'm encouraging you that this could be something that can really help you. If in future you find yourself in such a situation, I hope and pray that you never do. But if you ever find yourself in such difficulty, you can always make this little prayer. Even if you don't believe, you can just say, Jesus, if you are there, please help me. Jesus, if you are there, then in this dark moment I'm going through, shine your light, because I need your help. And that prayer, I invite you, brothers and sisters, that prayer can be something that really does help you, and which you may need. Hopefully you won't, but you may need it at some point. I'm going to finish by recommending a song. It's a song about somebody who feels himself drowning, just like St. Peter was drowning in the lake when Jesus called to him. And it's a song that encourages those listening to pray with the song, to ask Jesus for help if they need it. Sorry about this. So if that's something which you think might help you even now, perhaps you're stressed by exams, whatever it may be, whatever situation you're in, if you feel you need that help, this is a song that encourages you that when you feel you're drowning, you can always look to Jesus to help you. So this is the last video for the Easter break. I'll see you next week, hopefully live for once, in school. Otherwise, I wish you a great weekend and hope everything's going well for your return at school. Take care and God bless.